What makes for a good king? Allow me the pleasure of discussing with you one of history's most important questions. A king, draped in the regal robes of purple power, is a custodian, a steward, a guardian of his people and their destiny. Or at least he ought to be. Our world's past has been littered with many bad kings, and decorated with some good ones. How do we tell who was good and who was bad? We could measure their deeds, their legacies, even their legends. We could ascertain their attributes as well. Were they generous and kind? Did they show mercy and empathy? Or were they aloof in their reign in an ivory tower? Or down among their subjects, sharing in their joys and sorrows? From the glittering crown to the opulent throne, the emblems of kingship, the true treasures are humility, selflessness, faithfulness, and integrity. The same values we'd ultimately seek out in the heart of any leader. Key differences between monarch and dictator. We want one who wields their power for the benefit of his people. The hero king of Square Enix's Mana series of RPGs is a figure who combines the roles of monarch and champion, sovereign and warrior. Named Richard, undoubtedly after the Lion-Hearted, the hero king of Mana is a recurring character whose story began in Heroes of Mana. Come Trials of Mana, a 3D remake of the original Seiken Densetsu 3, the hero king's rule impacts the path of one of the game's protagonists, Duran. We get glimpses of the lord and leader Richard had become since his days as a prince and knight. He exhibits immense restraint of his power when attacked by the Crimson Wizard of another kingdom. Rather than allow his passions to direct his plans, he seems passive and level-headed, demonstrating self-control, not cowardice, with his people's well-being at the forefront of his mind. With all his consolidation of power, he understood that power is not an end. Looking at you, George Orwell! Plus, you could tell he's a good king because he's got those grandma hair rolls going on. Yeah, real King of Hearts look there. Now, it's understandable that the world which the hero king inhabited isn't entirely like our own, particularly in a series as rooted in light, color, levity, and relative innocence as Mana. The goal of Mana, ultimately, is for the player to have fun while the story's told. That's not the same goal of history, or even of history's myths. That said, I do have another hero king to tell you about. Before that, let me remind you that this micro-documentary is the second part of a short series that began with our previous video in which we explored the Mana series and the concept of Mana in Hawaiian traditions. That was a grimmer video than many we'd put out already, but it was one with a lot of my personal feelings about that very unique place in the world, so I appreciate anyone who watched it through. If you haven't seen it yet, I'd recommend watching it first. What exactly Mana meant to the Polynesian cultures will greatly influence what we're about to discuss. Oh, and please get the pronunciation correct. Even the Muppets had it right. In Hawaii, one name stands above all the rest. He's both the most important man in Hawaiian history, as well as the stuff of legend. King Kalani Pae'ea, Wohi o Kale Kini, Keali'i Kui Kamehameha, o Iolane I Kavikapu, Kau I Kaliholiho, Kuniakea, the Great. His name, Kamehameha, means the Lonely One. Not Turtle Destruction Wave, so let's just get that joke out of the way now. Also a good opportunity for me to acknowledge the passing of Akira Toriyama, legendary artist whose work impacted the lives of millions. May he rest in peace. We'll absolutely be exploring some of Toriyama Sensei's canon on this channel in the future. Look forward to it. Back to Kamehameha. You don't earn an epithet like the Great from sitting around on your okole. Don't look up okole. Kamehameha gets to hang out with the other greats in history because of his role in establishing the Kingdom of Hawaii. He was the first chief to unite the islands. Before King K's rule, the Sandwich Islands were dominated separately by different lords and ferociously fought over in bloody civil wars. Kamehameha was born during one of these wars, but he rose to become a powerful warrior unlike any other, wielding both politics and religion, and for the Hawaiians, you know that meant mana. As for his birth, legend and mysticism already surrounded his earliest years. Kamehameha came into the world in an unknown year in the 1700s, and it's said his coming was heralded by a fire in the heavens, a comet that streaked across the sky like a falling star, the first of many signs that marked his destiny. Hidden as a child from his political enemies and raised in the court of his uncle, Kalani Opu'u, he grew powerful in voice, in stature, in prowess, and in mana. When his uncle died, Kamehameha was entrusted with the stewardship of Kuka Ilimoku, the feathered god of war. He may not have been the next in succession for rule, but the entrusting of a spiritual responsibility meant that Kamehameha could begin to shift the tides towards his favor. But it was the lifting and moving of the sacred Naha stone, a large chunk of volcanic rock about the size of a small car, which was believed to be the fulfillment of prophecies defining his future as the one to conquer and unite. And I seen that stone. It ain't no easy bench press at the gym, bros. That thing is ginormous. It currently resides outside of the Heiau library in my hometown, and you'd get a big kahuna hernia trying to lift that thing. But King K was no waif. Historians estimate he was 7 feet tall, based on his personal effects that have survived to the modern day, such as his feathered cloak. Religion, prophecy, legend, powerful tools to convince others that you're the chosen one, but not everyone was so convinced. Kamehameha's youth was filled with battles and skirmishes. However, his ranks would receive additional aid from beyond the sea. Western sailors brought guns and traded with Kamehameha to equip his armies. He learned to make gunpowder from Westerners, using resources abundant on his island. He received counsel from 2 foreign sailors who were separated from their crew and came to dwell in Hawaii with him. Armed by prophets, chiefs, foreigners, and the god of war, plus a lineage descending from his divine ancestors of ancient times, Kamehameha was ready to strike and do everything in his power to end Hawaii's back and forth land grabs and petty strife forever.
Forward, my young brothers, and drink the bitter waters of battle. There is no turning back.
1790. Kamehameha amassed an armada of war canoes and invaded Maui. He defeated its Ali'i Nui, Chief Kalani Kupule. He fired cannons salvaged from a western ship. The deafening roar of the artillery must have been terrifying to those who had never heard such a sound before. But in Kamehameha's absence from home, his rival for control of the Big Island attempted to raid Kamehameha's territories. King K was forced to return with a vengeance, routing his enemies, who escaped into the realm of Pele, the volcano goddess. The Hawaiians took it as yet another miraculous sign that even Pele had chosen Kamehameha, when Kilauea's caldera and vents erupted, consuming the fleeing armies of his enemies with burning ash and volcanic vapors. Human footprints can still be found where the deserters were melted alive. With the Big Island of Hawaii secured and united, and Maui retaken after his initial assault, Oahu fell next under his stretching shadow. There in 1795, Kamehameha sent 10,000 warriors on 900 sea craft. The war culminated in a desperate battle between Kamehameha's forces and the defenders of Oahu, who were forced backward over the edge of the Pali, a sheer cliff plunging 1,000 feet into the valley below. Over 400 warriors plummeted to their deaths as the wall of Kamehameha's army closed in. Many of their remains wouldn't be discovered until the construction of highways in that area in modern history. Come 1810, Kauai's ruler, the last chief outside of Kamehameha's domain, surrendered and negotiated peace. Thus, Kamehameha gave the name of his home island of Hawaii to his entire kingdom, a name by which we know it today. Stockpiled weapons, Western advisors, religious iconography, intellect sharpened by adversity, immense military resource. Each of these things contributed to Kamehameha's victory, but the Hawaiians at the time would tell you it was the king's mana. For Kamehameha had learned how to increase his mana beyond that which he inherited from the gods, or from holy relics that came into his possession. But how does one increase mana? There's a startling similarity in role-playing games. Mana, as mentioned in our previous episode, go watch it, typically represents magic in RPGs, where it can track an individual statistic or attribute for a character. Mana in RPGs can be increased by equipping enchanted relics, such as necklaces or bracelets. Kamehameha inherited various items in which powerful mana was said to dwell, such as the Ka'e Kapu o Liloa, a sacred 14-foot sash of delicate feathers passed down since the 1400s. Mana in RPGs can be inherited, considering various jobs or classes that a character can inhabit, giving them greater magic affinities than other roles. Kamehameha was said to have descended from godly ancestors, inheriting generations worth of mana. Also, mana in RPGs can be gained through battle, especially through victory and violence. In these games, points systems play a key role, whether they're job points or ability points or experience points, reflected in incremental improvements to a character's basic statistics, including magical ones. Kamehameha's path to victory meant seizing the mana of others through violence. Before his conquest, King Kamehameha constructed the last temple of ancient Hawaii, a heiau. These heiaus were always built for a single purpose, dedicated to a sole goal. The goal of Kamehameha's Pu'ukohola heiau, to grant Kamehameha the mana and divine authority to conquer the islands. Today, his temple's remains can be visited. They're known as Pu'ukohola, or Hill of the Whale, Heiau National Historic Site. Built without mortar, constructed from sea stones carried by a chain of warriors over a nearby mountain from the shore beyond. It was here that the kingdom of Hawaii truly began, born in blood. It was here that Kamehameha gained the mana of his enemies. Remember the raiding armies that fled and were consumed by Pele and the Volcanoes' wrath? Those warriors had been led by Keoa, Kamehameha's cousin and rival for the rule of the Big Island. Once Kamehameha had finished constructing his heiau, he invited his cousin to appear under the guise of peace. Why Keoa accepted, we do not know, but it's apparent that he knew what was to become of him. When he and his men landed near Pu'ukohola, they were immediately taken prisoner by Kamehameha, and Keoa was killed. Before Kamehameha's god of war, the prisoners were killed and their bodies burned, and from their bones, their spiritual energies were devoured by Kamehameha. The Lonely One drank their mana, and they were some of the last human sacrifices on the Hawaiian Islands. Today, the site is a symbol of unification. Few landmarks are as important as this one in the history of Hawaii, the last temple. Standing there myself, looking at the forbidden pathways and the silent stones, I could feel the weight of history and the power of stories. His prophecies fulfilled, his enemies destroyed, every conflict between feuding ali'i ended, and his rule absolute. King Kamehameha the Great had changed the course of Pacific history. Today, Kamehameha Day on June 11th remembers the carefully crafted and ordered society of balance the hero king brought together like a sprawling forest gathered under the canopy of a massive mana tree.
Endless is the good that I have given you to enjoy.
Not exactly a story you'd hear in Disney's Moana. The next time you hear the word mana, remember the story of Hawaii's conquest and a solitary monarch perched atop his heiau. Yet he wasn't the first conquering hero king, and he wouldn't be the last in history. In fact, it's said that when the Hawaiians first reached these islands, that they displaced a mystical race of small, almost gnome-like inhabitants who could construct complex earthen architecture like walls and fish ponds overnight. The Menehune. Were there really original indigenous peoples in Hawaii before the Hawaiians? That is a story for another day. If you learned something, please hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you want to see more micro-documentaries like this one, consider making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/Gamelogica. Let us know in the comments what topic you want to see Gamelogica explore along the crossroads between video games, myth, spirituality, and religion. Fidem Fabula Ludos. See you next time.